What if I told you the world isn't ruled by kings, presidents, or parliaments, but by something far more invisible? Something that doesn't need armies, because it owns them. Something that doesn't pass laws, because it funds those who do. Something that creates money not through labor, not through trade, but through debt. This is the story of the hidden empire built on infinite debt and invisible power. The empire that enslaves nations without a single shot fired. The one we all serve, even if we don't realize it. And to understand how it conquered the world, we need to go back to the moment money stopped being real. Before money became a game of illusion, it was something tangible: gold, silver, and trust. For centuries, economies were grounded in real value. When merchants traded in the Middle Ages, gold coins had intrinsic worth. A pound of gold was a pound of gold everywhere. There were no hidden algorithms, no digital ledgers, no speculative bubbles. But there was one big problem with gold: it was finite. Empires could only expand as fast as their gold reserves allowed. Then came the spark of temptation. Banks, once simple storage houses, discovered a trick. They realized they could issue receipts for gold that didn't actually exist, because not everyone came to claim it at once. It was the birth of fractional reserve banking, the moment when promises began to replace reality. A banker could lend 10 times more money than he physically held, and no one would know. And with that illusion, a new kind of empire began to rise, one built not on gold, but on confidence. As trade expanded in the 18th and 19th centuries, so did debt. Governments borrowed to fund wars, railways, and colonies. Behind every revolution, there was a banker. Let's name a few. The Rothschild family, who financed both sides of European wars. The Bank of England, created in 1694, lending to the crown with interest. The House of Morgan in the United States, which quietly steered the American economy before the Federal Reserve ever existed. By the dawn of the 20th century, the financial elite had found the perfect formula: debt equals power. Because whoever controls credit, controls governments. In 1913, that formula became law. Amid growing economic chaos, a group of bankers and politicians met in secret on Jekyll Island, off the coast of Georgia. They weren't meeting to solve the financial crisis, they were meeting to control it. Out of that secret meeting came the Federal Reserve Act. It was sold to the public as a safeguard against economic instability, but in reality, it centralized the creation of money into the hands of a private banking system. The US government no longer printed its own money directly, it now borrowed it with interest from the Federal Reserve. And here's the illusion: every new dollar was born as debt. If every debt were paid off tomorrow, there would be no money left in circulation. The system could only survive if more debt was constantly created. From that moment on, infinite debt became the foundation of global finance. After World War II, global powers gathered at Bretton Woods in 1944 to rebuild the world's monetary order. The United States, now holding 2/3 of the world's gold, offered a new deal. The US dollar would become the global reserve currency, backed by gold. Every other currency would peg itself to the dollar. It seemed stable, honest, predictable. But remember, every empire built on trust eventually tests its limits. As America printed money to fund wars in Korea and Vietnam, its gold reserves couldn't keep up. Foreign governments, led by France under Charles de Gaulle, began demanding gold in exchange for their dollars. In 1971, facing collapse, President Richard Nixon made a stunning announcement: temporarily became forever. The gold standard was dead. Money was no longer backed by anything real. And yet, the system didn't crash. It adapted because it had to. Debt became the new gold. Once money was no longer tied to gold, there were no natural limits. Governments could print, banks could lend, consumers could borrow. The illusion was complete. Money was no longer a thing, it was a belief. And the modern financial system, from mortgages to derivatives, became one massive network of trust-based debt. Every credit card swipe, every student loan, every government bond added another layer to the invisible pyramid. The total global debt today is over $300 trillion. That's more than 3 times the entire world's economic output. And here's the shocking part: it's mathematically impossible to repay, because the system requires perpetual expansion. The moment the debt stops growing, the entire structure begins to collapse. Every few decades, the illusion shows its cracks. 1929, 2008, 2020. Each time we're told it's a market failure. But look closer and you'll see a pattern. When economies crash, who gets rescued? The average citizen, or the institutions holding the debt? In 2008, trillions were created overnight to save the system. But that money didn't flow to the people losing homes, it flowed to the banks that caused the collapse. Debt crises are not accidents, they're pressure valves, opportunities to consolidate more power. The pattern is ancient. 1. Inflate the economy with easy credit. 2. Let it collapse. 3. Absorb the assets of those who can't pay. It's not chaos, it's harvest, and the farmers, they wear suits. What happens when even governments can't escape the system they built? Enter the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the World Bank, institutions designed to help struggling nations. But their loans come with conditions: privatization, austerity, deregulation. Nations trade sovereignty for solvency. They sign away control of their economies in exchange for temporary relief. It's colonialism reinvented, not through armies, but through interest rates. Today, dozens of nations are effectively trapped in debt servitude. They no longer control their currencies, their policies, or their futures. The empire of infinite debt doesn't need to invade, it simply lends. Fast forward to today. Money barely exists in physical form. Over 90% of it lives in digital ledgers, moved by algorithms, unseen by human eyes. A single line of code can erase or create billions. Central banks now experiment with central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, programmable money that can be tracked, restricted, or even expired. The illusion is becoming total. In a world where every transaction can be monitored and controlled, freedom itself becomes conditional. And while people debate politics, the real rulers, those who control credit, liquidity, and data, remain invisible. History whispers the same warning, from Rome's debased silver coins to Weimar Germany's hyperinflation. Every civilization that divorced money from real value eventually faced collapse. Because once money becomes infinite, it becomes worthless. Yet each time, the architects of the system survive and rebuild it in their image. We are now standing at the edge of another transformation. AI-driven markets, synthetic currencies, debt levels never seen before. The question is no longer if the system will reset, but who will own it when it does. First, debt is not a flaw of the system, it is the system. Every dollar in existence represents someone's obligation to pay. Second, crises don't destroy empires of finance, they strengthen them. Each collapse transfers more assets, more influence, and more dependency upward. Third, money is no longer about value, it's about control. And as money becomes digital, that control becomes absolute. The empire of infinite debt doesn't need your consent. It only needs your participation, your willingness to trade real labor, real time, and real life for numbers on a screen. But history also shows that every illusion eventually meets reality. When that moment comes, when confidence collapses, what will replace it? A freer system built on transparency, or a digital cage built on convenience? That choice will depend on how much truth we're willing to face today. Because the hidden empire's greatest weapon is our ignorance. If this story opened your eyes, don't let it fade into silence. Share it, question everything, and remember, the most dangerous power is the one we don't see.